Hey everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to be making the most adorable, incredibly unique beauty bag. Today we're making the bomb.com beauty bag from More Me Know. Now to be completely honest, the name of the pattern is probably what hooked me. I kind of say bomb.com way too much. I mean, it's not in style, it's not cool, but I say it a lot. So the name of the pattern really got my attention. But then, you guys, check out the uniqueness of this bag. First, let's talk about this panel right here. This is a great bag. If you have those panels, you know what I'm talking about. If you're in some of those custom fabric groups, you purchase these really cool panels, but then you're like, I don't make clothes, what am I gonna do with it? This is a great bag for it. So I utilize the panel here on the front. The back is vinyl, the bottom is vinyl, the sides are vinyl. But here's the thing, if we undo these little magnetic snaps on this flap here and then open it up, you can see we have a place for all of our brushes. We have a little slip clear pocket over here, a zipper clear pocket on this side. This is such a fun bag. So I'm gonna show you this as a beauty bag because that's what I have in it. So here we go. So here we have like some brushes here, and this is just a little clear zipper pocket. This is a clear slip pocket. You open up the top zipper up here, bada bang. Inside we have another clear zipper pocket and a slip pocket that you could also make a zip pocket if you wanted to. This bag is so cute and it's a great beauty bag, but I want you to think of this in another way. This would be a great craft bag. You put some markers, some colored pencils here. You can put your crayons in here, some notepads right here. This would also be great if you wanted to use it for like wood carving, any sort of special hobby where they have kind of like a lot of tools that are skinny, paintbrushes, all of that. I was actually thinking of modifying this pattern in the future and putting foam interfacing on the bag part and then adjusting this elastic right here a little bit to make this like a camera bag. So I could put my memory cards right here, I could put my batteries right here, I could put my camera inside of here. Having that foam would really, protect the camera if I decided to do that. You could definitely just add some tabs on the side here with some D-rings, and then you can make a shoulder strap for this. You can make it a crossbody bag. There's a lot you can do with this pattern. I'm going to be walking you through the pattern as is, just a couple of little tweaks. I'm just tweaking the top zipper just a tiny bit. Really no big changes here. So I'm excited to go through this pattern with you today. There are some kind of new things in here. You probably haven't done these clear zip pockets the way that the pattern describes. So this is a great skill building pattern as well. You're gonna learn some new techniques here. You can see this little handle here is something that is new for me. We're gonna walk through all of it. I would say that this is a confident beginner pattern. I would say you should have some experience making pouches. Maybe have some experience boxing corners. I want you to kind of know the basics and be comfortable with that, because the things you're gonna get uncomfortable with potentially are like this clear zip pocket and just working with that clear vinyl. That's gonna be kind of the challenge in today's tutorial, and that's what you're gonna be really working on. So I don't want you focused on how do I box a corner, how do I put in a zipper. Have some experience doing zippers, box corners, things like that, and then move on to this. This is a great bag, and it's so stinking cute. So if you're not already subscribed to the OklaRoots channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. At the very top of the comment section will be a comment from me, and it will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. So if there's just one part you're interested in, click on that timestamp and it'll take you straight there in the video. All right, let's get started. So for today's bag, you're gonna need 1/3 yard of vinyl. This is going to be for the sides, for the flap, for the bottom of the bag. Vinyl or cork is really what you wanna work with here because you want it to be a little bit more heavy duty. We're also gonna be using clear vinyl. Now, in the original bag, I used white, just clear vinyl. Today, I'm using this really cool purple clear vinyl. You can use whatever kind you want. Next, we have 1/2 yard of exterior fabric. Now, because of the size of this bag, this is great for those panels or those fabrics that have really big prints. So you can see this is a fabric that has really big flowers. This is a perfect bag for this fabric. And then you're gonna need a half a yard of lining fabric. Now, as always, I'm gonna be using this waterproof canvas. Waterproof canvas, especially for a bag like this, is great because it's easy to wipe down, it's easy to keep clean. I don't have to interface this with my woven interfacing because it has a nice sturdy feel to it and it doesn't fray. Waterproof canvas is going to be great for the lining in today's tutorial. Next, we have our interfacing. We're gonna have 1 yard of woven interfacing. I'm using Woven Fuse today. You can also use Pellon SF101. You're gonna wanna use this on any of like your quilt cotton or cotton lycra pieces, anything that can stretch or fray. So I will be using this on that exterior fabric. I will not be using it on vinyl or on the lining, anything like that. However, if you are using quilt cotton for your lining, go ahead and use this on that as well. You're gonna want 1/3 of a yard of a really strong stabilizer. So this is Decoville Heavy, and you can see it's pretty firm, you know, it's pretty tough. This is mainly for the base of the bag and for placement of the handle. You don't need a whole lot of it, but you do wanna make sure you're grabbing something that's a little bit more firm. So this or Peltex would work as well. And then you'll want 1/3 of a yard of a non-woven interfacing. So for me, I'm using this Decoville Light. So this is Decoville Heavy, this is Decoville Light. Decoville Heavy is actually just twice as thick as Decoville Light. You can see with Decoville Heavy, I can lift it up and it just goes straight up. Decoville Light, it kind of flops around a little bit more. It's still pretty firm, but it's not as firm as the Heavy. It's much easier to sew with and work with. This is going to be what kind of keeps the structure of the bag really nice so the whole bag doesn't collapse on itself. If you wanted to use foam in this pattern, I suggest you use foam on the pouch part of the bag. So that would be this part right here. Use your foam on this part, but still use the Decoville Light for the flap, because the Decoville Light on the flap is what keeps this really firm, really nice. But you could definitely use foam on this part instead of the Decoville Light to give your bag a nice cushy feel if you wanted to put something in there that could be a little bit breakable. So now let's go through the pattern pieces, starting with the ones that are just vinyl. This is going to be your side accent panels and also the bottom panel. Now she does give you measurements for all of these, so if you don't want to trace it out and then cut it out, you don't have to. She's going to provide you with the measurements on all the pattern pieces. You're going to need a total of 4 cuts from your side accent panels, 2 going one direction, 2 going the other. So I'll just show you real quick. You see, just like that, we have 2 where the notch is on the left and 2 where the notch is on the right. This is going to be important for putting the bag together. And then you have 1 cut of your bottom panel. Since this is vinyl, I don't have these interfaced with anything. Next is your flat piece. This is that piece that holds the brushes and has a cute little pocket on it. From this, you're going to want an exterior or lining piece. So let me just tell you, this piece right here is what's going to be on the inside of the flap, and it's going to be what we put our brushes on, what we put our pocket on. Right now, this is just quilt cotton, and I'm not going to cover this with anything. But if you wanted to make sure that if this got dirty, you could wipe it down, maybe get some iron-on vinyl and layer that over this so that it's easy to wipe down. Or use a piece of waterproof canvas for this cut right here. So like I said, this piece of fabric here is going to be this piece of fabric right here. So you can see it will get, you know, colors or marks or whatever on it if you have something kind of messy you're putting in here. So if you want this easy to clean, like I said, cover it with some iron-on vinyl or use waterproof canvas here. You're gonna also want a cut of your Decoville Light to keep this nice and firm, and a cut of your vinyl. This will be what's seen on the outside of the bag. And have a lot of fun with this. You could quilt this vinyl, that would look really nice. You can put an embroidery design on this vinyl just to kind of jazz it up a little bit. This is a big piece of the bag that if we're just using a piece of vinyl like we are today, it's kind of boring. So you could have a lot of fun with this piece right here. Next is our exterior. Now this is going to be kind of like the focal point of the bag. So what we're going to see on the exterior, and also when we open the flap, what we see on the inside. Like I said, if you have big prints, this is great for those big prints. I love these big, big, big flowers. A lot of times a print like this is kind of lost in a bag because it's just too big, but this is a perfect one for it. Both of these are quilt cotton, and they're both already interfaced with the woven interfacing. You're going to also want 2 cuts of your Decoville Light, and that's just to kind of firm this up so that it works well with the vinyl and it keeps its shape really nicely. The next pattern piece is going to be for our lining. Once again, she gives you measurements for all of this. You're just going to want 2 cuts of this. If you're using quilt cotton, you're going to also want to interface this with woven interfacing. Since I'm using waterproof canvas, I don't have it interfaced with anything. This will be firm and work great on its own. Okay, here are the rest of the cuts that don't have pattern pieces, but she does give you the measurements for it. First, you're gonna have 3 cuts of clear vinyl for your pockets. One of these cuts is smaller than the other, so they're all the same width, just one's a little bit shorter. One is shorter, and then you have 2 that are a little bit longer. My vinyl comes with this tissue paper already wrapped on it. I'm going to keep that tissue paper with it just in case I need it. I'm going to also show you what I do to sew this vinyl at the sewing machine and prevent my foot from sticking to it. Next, you're going to have 2 pieces of lining. This is going to be for that pocket on the lining of the bag. You could add a zipper to this. You don't have to. I'm not going to be adding a zipper today. After that, we have the handle. So this is just a cut of vinyl. This is going to go on the top of the bag. And then we have our zipper tabs. Now she suggests 4 zipper tabs. I'm going to suggest 6, and I cut each of these to 2 inches by 2 inches. I'm not interfacing these with anything, but you definitely can interface them with the woven fuse if you'd like. After that, we have our Decoville Heavy or our Peltex, the really firm interfacing. You're gonna have a cut here for the bottom of the bag, and then a cut that's gonna hold the handle in place, and I'll show you how that's done. And then last, we have a cut of our exterior fabric. This is actually gonna be used for binding a clear pocket, so just giving a nice little accent to the top of a clear pocket. I do have this interfaced with my woven interfacing. You don't have to for this, but if you'd like, go ahead and interface this. Okay, so here's like the other things, the other hardware for the bag. I'll be using zipper tape today, so I'll show you how to cut that down when we get to the step. My zipper tape is from Sally Tomato. If you're not using zipper tape, you're gonna want 1 14-inch handbag zipper and 2 7-inch all-purpose zippers. Next, you're gonna want some double fold elastic. Now I get this from Biani, and I'll have a link for everything down below. You're gonna want a cut of this that is 6 inches long. For my magnets today, I'm actually kind of switching it up. I'm gonna be using these magnetic snaps from Cam Snaps. Now these are kind of cool because these are actually placed using a rivet press. And since I'm already gonna be using my rivet press with my little rivets today, I might as well try this out. You could also use the magnets that have the prongs on the back and you open. That will work perfect as well. But since I have these, I'm gonna try them out. I'm using the 14mm magnetic snaps from Cam Snaps, and then I'll also be adding on some 9mm rivets. So here's a bunch of the other stuff we'll be using today. Like I said, I'll be using my rivet press. You're gonna also want a healthy supply of clips. The thread for my bobbin is this Gutermann thread. It's just a basic polyester thread. The thread for my top of my machine, my top needle, is going to be this Mara 70. This is a little bit thicker and it looks really nice on the vinyl and on the fabric. I have 2 marking tools here. One is a leather marking tool, one is an air erasing marking tool. I also have my seam ripper and stiletto. I like to always have glue on hand. You never know when you're gonna need it, and this Beacon 3-in-1 glue is great. I've got my Kai fabric scissors, my bag tag. The needles I'll be using today are the Microtex 8012 needles. I always have this little 1-inch by 6-inch ruler on hand to help with placement. If you're struggling with sewing on that clear vinyl, we're gonna use some Scotch tape today. I will tell you, I had a lot of troubles with my machine, so I added this to the bottom of my presser foot and no more trouble. So I'll show you how I did that. And then I also have some double-sided tape here just to help hold things in place. Specifically that top handle, that's the one thing that's kind of tricky to hold in place. So I use a little bit of this to help with that. Okay, let's first fuse some things together. So I'm going to start with the flap lining. So this is gonna be the inside of the flap, what you're gonna see with the brushes and everything like that. Grab that piece. If you're using quilt cotton, you should already have that interface with woven interfacing. Also grab your Decoville light. And so I'm just gonna lay my Decoville light with the shiny side, which is the glue side, up, and then I'll lay my fabric, wrong side, the back side, down. And I just center it over my cut, just like that. And then from the right side, so from the top of the fabric, I'm going to fuse these together. I find this is much easier than fusing it from the back. Sometimes we have to fuse the Decoville light from the back because maybe we're working with vinyl or we've got something on this and we don't want to put our iron over it. And it works fine, but it really works best if you fuse this from the front. So if your Decoville light is a little bit bigger than your fabric, you can just trim it down. My interfacing is always a little bit bigger than my fabric cuts. So once you have this entirely fused, we're gonna just set this to the side for a little bit and we're gonna let it cool down. Decoville light works really, really well, but you wanna give it a minute to cool down. So we're gonna just put this to the side while we fuse the rest of our pieces. Next, we're going to fuse the stabilizer to the bottom panel. So grab your bottom panel, and this is what I was saying before. If your bottom panel is vinyl, you don't want to fuse it from the front side. So we want to center our firm stabilizer. So for me, this is that Decoville Heavy. We want to center that on the bottom panel. To make this easier, you can grab a ruler, any ruler, and mark 1/2 inch in from all the edges. So I'm just using a fabric marker here. And I'm not going along the entire edge. I just want a general idea of where 1/2 inch is from all 4 edges. And that will just help me center this. So you could probably just do 2 sides really. I'm just gonna do 3 sides. And now I can take my Decoville Heavy and line it up with those marked lines. And that means I'll have 1/2 inch space around all 4 edges, which is gonna help us later and keep this centered. So as you can see, I have my vinyl wrong side up and I have my Decoville Heavy glue side down. Now I'm going to grab a scrap piece of fabric and cover the back of my Decoville Light and my vinyl. And then I'll take my iron with steam and just press this in place. If you start having problems with your Decoville Heavy where it's kind of pulling up on the corners or on the sides, grab your glue and just glue it in place. I do that all the time. Sometimes when we're messing with the bag, the Decoville Heavy starts moving around on its own and it becomes a headache. Just glue it in place, let it dry, and you're fine. So I'm gonna fuse this on as best I can. Once you have it fused on, just pull on those corners. If they pull up easily, then you need to fuse it for longer. I'm gonna fuse this top edge just a little bit longer. Now grab your flap exterior. So for me, it's this vinyl, and we're gonna turn it wrong side up. And then grab your handle stabilizer. So this is also Decoville Heavy. And we're gonna fuse this onto this vinyl piece here. So grab your pattern piece, and on your pattern piece, it has placement. So all I'm gonna do actually is just line up my stabilizer and put it right over that rectangle, just like that. Hold it in place. Move the pattern piece out of the way. Grab my scrap piece of fabric here, trying to keep it from moving. Don't let that stabilizer move. You could add tape or glue here to help with this, or you could just live dangerously. And then we're gonna press just like we did with the bottom panel from the back. Woo! Burn my finger a little bit. And I'm pressing this with steam for a few seconds in each spot. I haven't had any problem with this warping my vinyl. However, if you're nervous about it, just glue this on. You don't have to press this. You could just use your beacon glue, use some heavy-duty double-sided tape, and just put that in place here, and that will also work just fine. So there we go. Now I have this in place. If I flip this over, my vinyl still looks fine on the front, so there we go. All right, next I'm gonna fuse my Decoville Light to my exterior main panels. If you're using vinyl for this, you don't need to fuse the Decoville Light. But if you're using quilt cotton or cotton lycra, you're gonna wanna do that. So grab a piece of Decoville Light and lay it shiny side up. So that's the glue side. Grab one of your panels and lay it wrong side down. And just line up all the corners. There we go. And then we'll just fuse this from the front side of the fabric. So once you have one panel fused in place, just go ahead and repeat that with your other exterior panel. So once you have all that fused in place, go ahead and set these to the side. And now let's work on constructing the flap lining. I'm gonna take all 6 of my zipper tabs and just prep them now since I'm here. So grab a zipper tab and lay it right side down and fold 2 of the edges together, wrong sides together, and just press. Open up that zipper tab and then fold those parallel edges, wrong sides together in to meet that middle press. So we're just kind of folding everything in towards the center. Do this on the other side as well. And then you can just fold the whole unit in half so that those long raw edges are tucked into the middle, just like that. Go ahead and repeat this for your other zipper tabs. Okay, once you have all this prepped, we only need 4, so just grab 4 of them. You can set the other 2 to the side. So my little zipper tabs here are about 1/2 inch by 2 inches. Okay, so now I'm gonna grab my zipper tape. And if you're using pre-cut zippers, you don't have to do this, but if you're using zipper tape, you're gonna wanna cut this down. So we want our zippers to be a finished size of 8 inches. So I'm just gonna cut mine down to 8 inches. First, I'm gonna cut off this little tail over here because I don't need that. And then I'm just gonna cut my zipper tape down to 8 inches. I'm going to do this for 2 of them. If you're using zipper tape, don't forget to add your zipper pulls. So now we're going to add our zipper tabs to our zipper tape. Grab one of your zipper tabs and just hug it around the edge. So you can see the reason I changed the size of this is because my zipper tape is wider than 1 inch. So I want my zipper tabs to be wider than my zipper tape so then I can cut it down. So I'm just going to clip on zipper tabs to each edge of my zipper tape. So now we can take these to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch along this interior fold closest to the center of the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have those top stitched on, you can just cut down your zipper tabs so that they end up the same width as your zipper tape. So now you can take one of your zippers and just set it to the side. We're just going to work on one for now. So grab your clear vinyl piece that's the shorter of the 3 clear vinyl pieces. Remember, 2 of them are a little bit taller. This one is shorter. Grab the shorter one and lay it face up. If it's clear vinyl, it doesn't really have a right side or a wrong side. What I'm actually going to do is mark the midpoint on this. So I'm just going to fold it in half with the short sides together. I'm going to grab my leather marking tool and just make a tiny little mark on the top fold so I know where the midpoint is. I'm going to do the same thing with my zipper, just finding the midpoint on both sides. Just the tiniest little mark in the seam allowance. There we go. Okay, so take your zipper, and when the zipper is closed, the zipper pull should be on the left, and lay it face down, matching up the midpoint mark on your zipper tape with the midpoint mark on your clear vinyl. Clip them together at that midpoint mark, and then just clip the entire top edge of your zipper to your clear vinyl. Now, this type of pocket is a little different. First of all, this bottom edge of our zipper tab, that's going to stay exposed and it's going to stay raw. So if you really worry about the fabric unraveling right here, you can grab some fray check and just put a tiny drop of fray check on the raw edge of your zipper tabs to prevent that from happening. However, I haven't had a problem with that, but you never know. I mean, if kids are using this, you never know. So now what we're going to do is base this in place, but where the stitches are when we base this are going to be seen in the end, and we're going to actually use that as a guide to top stitch later. So we're not going to baste it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to baste it at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If you have tissue paper, you might want to use that and lay it underneath your clear vinyl. So as you feed this through the machine, the vinyl doesn't stick to the bed of your sewing machine. Okay, so if you sewed through your tissue paper like I did, just go ahead and remove that. So like I said, if you wanted to add a little bit of fray check, you can do that now. I'm just going to add the tiniest bit onto the edge of my raw fabric on the bottom here. I'm not too worried about the top of my zipper tab, just this right here. So now what you're going to do is you're going to fold your zipper up and fold the zipper tape underneath your clear vinyl. So this is actually where, if you have a colored clear vinyl, it's going to help you hide maybe imperfect stitching. So I'm going to fold my clear vinyl up. Instead of just folding it right at the stitches, I'm going to fold it up a little bit above the stitches, just like that. And that way I can go to the sewing machine and I can see through the clear vinyl and just stitch right over those previous stitches. But you can see my vinyl is purple and it's a little bit darker, so you can't really see the stitches underneath it, which means I can get away with a little bit more here. If I don't line it up right on top of the stitches I just made when I was basting this in place, it's okay. Also, remember, basting stitches can be taken out. So if you end up top stitching this and it's not right over those basting stitches, just grab a seam ripper and pull out the basting stitches and just leave the top stitches in place. So once you have this folded under just like this, you know, the clear vinyl is folded, the zipper is folded underneath the clear vinyl. There we go, fold it down as much as possible. If it makes it easier, you could use double-sided tape underneath here to keep this really straight. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch on the clear vinyl 1/8 of an inch away from this fold here. I'm gonna grab some Scotch tape and put that on the bottom of my presser foot to help with this, and I'll show you how I do that. So there you go. So this clear vinyl can be very, very challenging to work with and very frustrating. However, if you get the hang of it, use that Scotch tape, use some tissue paper. It can be much, much easier than you think if you just work with it. Okay, next we're going to fold this bottom edge under 1/4 of an inch. To be honest, I just eyeball this. You can definitely use double-sided tape here. She highly recommends you doing that. I'm just gonna use clips, but double-sided tape would be very, very helpful here. I find that the clear vinyl kind of sticks to itself pretty well, so the clips and just holding it in place at the machine work fine for me. But make this as easy as possible for you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. There we go. So I just folded that under just like that. So now we're going to place this zipper pocket on the lining side. So for me, it's my pretty exterior fabric. We're gonna place this on that flap. She has markings on here for you to do that, or we can find the midpoint on the top of this flap. And I'm just gonna use my scissors here to mark that midpoint, since this will be hidden in a seam later. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure 3 3/4 of an inch down from that top midpoint mark. I'm gonna use my air erasing marker here to just mark a line just like that. And now I'm going to grab my zipper pocket and I'm going to lay it right side down. So I'm going to flip it up, wrong side of my zipper is up, the bottom edge of my clear pocket is up over the top angled edge of my flap, just like that. And I'm just going to line up the midpoint with that marked line. So this needs to be centered. If you want to look at the sides here, kind of move it to the side a little bit. There you go. The sides should line up, be the same width as the flap. Get it on that marked line. Since I'm using fabric here, I can just use some pins to pin this in place. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along this edge anywhere between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to go with 1/4 of an inch here. We are not going to be top stitching this, so this top edge of the zipper will just be staying like it is. You should go over this twice just to make sure it really stays in place, and make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end of your zipper tabs. All right, there we go. And just like we did on the other side, I'm going to add a little bit of fray check. Remember, this is an oil, so you don't want to get it all over the place. Okay, so now we have our zipper stitched on. Let's go ahead and pull our pocket down. It might be easier if you close the zipper here. And then just straighten out your zipper and push it down, just like that. Now, line up the edges of your clear pocket with the edges of the flap. If they don't reach all the way, that's okay. Don't finagle this too much. Remember, this is a seam allowance over here. We're still gonna lose anything on the edge here. So as you can see, if it's not perfectly straight, if it doesn't reach all the way, that's okay. We're gonna have 1/2 of an inch over here that gets cut off. So don't stress out. All right, so I'm gonna pin it down on the sides. So now you can see here's my zipper. It opens just like this. We don't top stitch the top of the zipper over here because we don't need to. So now we're gonna sew this in place. We're gonna baste down the sides and top stitch down the bottom. We're gonna do it all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, there we go. What do you think? How was it? Did you try it? I hope you tried it. So just so we don't have to worry about it in the future, go ahead and move your zipper pull to the center. That way we don't have to worry about accidentally sewing over this in a later step. So now we're gonna add the little elastic right here that's gonna hold the brushes and the pens, whatever you want it to hold. And this is one of those things that I know for me, I thought was going to be a lot of work, and it is actually very, very little work. So you're gonna love this. So if you haven't already, go ahead and cut your elastic down to 6 inches long, which is just as long as my little ruler here. All right, so figure out which side you want to be the right side or the wrong side. I'm gonna say that the shiny side is the right side, but you guys know how I am with wrong side and right side of things. I'm probably wrong, but I'm gonna say the shiny side is the right side. I'm gonna grab my little measuring tool here, and on the back of my elastic, I'm gonna measure in 1 inch from each short edge and just mark a line. So now take your short edge of your elastic and fold it wrong sides together so that the short edge meets that mark you just made. You could definitely use some tape here if you'd like, just to hold this in place. Go ahead and do the same on the other side. Fold that in. So we're folding it in 1/2 inch. We marked it 1 inch so that way when we fold it, it'll be easier to get that perfect 1/2 inch. Now grab your pattern piece. Just lay it over your flap. I'm just gonna line it up with the bottom and left edge. Since I have a bump here, I'm not gonna worry about the top, just the bottom and left edge. And then take your elastic so it's right side up so the folded sides are down, and just line this up over the marking. So you see here, this little rectangle here, that's the placement for your elastic. Just line it up over that. There we go. And I'm just gonna use some pins here to pin this in place. So now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch a little box on these little 1/2 inch foldovers on the ends. So we're not sewing along here. We don't want to sew along the edges. We're just gonna go towards the top and sew a little 1/2 inch box to hold down this foldover. We're gonna do the same thing on the bottom. Do your best to check underneath the elastic to make sure you're catching this raw edge as you're sewing. It doesn't do you much good if you sew past it and you don't get that raw edge. So let's just try to keep a nice little 1/2 inch box right here just to sew down that fold. Okay, so here we go. So now we're going to line up our template over that marking. Now, if you have your own preference on how far apart all these lines are, go ahead and mark it however you want. I'm going to follow the pattern. I like, they're kind of some different sizes. There's a really skinny part, there's a fatter part. I like that. So I'm just gonna follow her marking. So I'm just gonna mark with my air erasing fabric marker, little lines right where her dashes are in her pattern. So I'm gonna take this to the machine and I am going to just sew straight lines right over where I marked, from one edge of the elastic all the way to the other. I'm gonna back stitch on the beginning and the end each time. All right, now we're gonna add the magnets. See, this is coming together a lot easier than you probably thought it would. So I just took my template and poked a hole where the magnet spots are. We're gonna be installing the male snaps. So I just line up the top of my template with this top edge right here. Again, don't try to get the whole thing to line up because we've got stuff here. So we're just gonna do the top and then mark a dot through that hole. Flip this over so that the pattern is wrong side up. Line it up on the other side. And then mark a hole. Now I'm gonna grab the hole punch die for my rivet press and just insert that. And then using those marks, I'm just gonna punch a hole right where those marks are. If you're using the magnetic snaps that have the prongs, obviously you don't have to do this. You're just gonna trace out the slits for your prongs, cut them with a seam ripper, insert your magnets. It's very simple. I'm just showing you a different way to do it. So here we go. I'm going to grab 2 caps. So male and female get caps. So I'm going to grab 2 caps and I'm going to grab 2 of the male ends of these magnetic rivets. So you can see these are the male ends. And now the dies that come with these, there's only 3 dies. So the top die stays the same, which is nice. You only have to screw 1 die in. The top die will always be the same, and that is for the cap. The bottom die is the one you're gonna change. So since I'm using the male snap, I need the die that looks like the female end, so it has a little crevice in there. I'm gonna put that in my rivet press. I'm just going to pop in my male magnetic snap and then put the cap on the back, just like that. And now I'm gonna insert this into my press down. So the cap side goes up and then I just line up the male end with the die and push down. And one thing I notice is it likes to kind of get stuck in that die. Oh, it came out pretty easily. That's good. So just repeat this for the other one. All right, the interior of your flap is now done. Go ahead and set this to the side. So now let's work on the handle. And here's the thing. I don't know if I'm doing this right. To be honest, I've never done a handle like the fancy option. She gives you a very basic option and then a fancy option. I'm going to try to show you the fancy option. You can see I did the fancy option on here. It's where the sides are a little bit wider and then it gets skinny on the top and then widens out. I'm still not sure I did it right, but I'm going to show you how I think you're supposed to do it. So I'm going to take my handle and lay it wrong side up. I'm going to grab a ruler and I'm just going to measure a midpoint line down the long center and just mark it. Now I'm going to fold up my long raw edges, wrong sides together, up to meet that midpoint line along the whole edge here. Do the same on the other side, so both the long edges should be folded up to meet one another on the back. Now we're going to fold the whole thing in half again, so we're tucking those raw edges in towards the center. Let's go ahead and clip along the whole edge. So now we have a little skinny double folded handle. Now, I'm going to grab my leather marking tool and we're going to measure in 1 3/4 inch from the short edge. So 1 3/4 inch, just like this, and make a mark. I'm going to do it on the other side as well. So now we're going to top stitch along the 2 long edges, only between these marks. So we're not going to top stitch all the way to the edge. We're going to start over here 1 3/4 inch, stop, do the other side as well, leaving the ends untop stitched, I think. So we top stitched only between those marks. Now we're going to take these edges here and fold them up, trying to keep them together as much as possible, just like this. You see? So now you have this folded kind of fatter edge and then it goes skinny. So I'm going to use some tape here to help me with all this. Because what I notice is when I fold this, these little edges like to kind of go free. I'm going to actually, you know what, I'm going to clip these in at a V like that. There we go. So I'm just going to fold it and clip it for now. So I'm folding in these edges 1/2 inch. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to clip kind of like a little V in down towards the middle so they don't have to worry about these edges showing. And then I'm going to fold the whole thing in 1/2 inch. Okay, so now we just have to attach this to the flap. So now grab your exterior, which is the vinyl, and it has that Decoville Heavy already attached on the back. And now I'm going to grab my double-sided tape and I'm just going to cut off a little 1/2 inch piece, just a nice small piece here. So then I am going to attach that to the back of one of my flat edges here. And when I do that, it's going to hold in the whole thing. So I have it attached over the raw edge of the flap so that it holds it all together. And now what I'm going to do, you can use the template if you want, but I'm actually going to feel around here and I can feel exactly where the left edge of my Decoville Heavy is. And so I just want to tape this down right over that edge so it's on top of the Decoville Heavy but lined up with the top and the sides. So you can feel around for this, you can mark this if you like. So once I know where that is, I'm just going to take my tape off and I'll just tape this in place. And this tape works really, really good. However, it can gunk up your needle. So if you need to, after you sew this, you might want to change your needle out or just clean it off with an alcohol prep pad. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch a little 1/2 inch rectangle over the edges of this just to hold this in place, and then we'll work on the second side. Okay, there we go. Let me remind you, thread that is the same color as your vinyl is a good idea here. It's a good idea. Okay, so we've got one side on and we're just going to repeat that with the other side. So I'm going to grab another piece of this super sticky tape, cut off 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch. Flip up my strap so I'm looking at the underside. And then I'm just going to add the tape over that raw edge so that it also holds it in place so I don't need the clips. And then I'll remove the tape. Keep this nice and straight. Lift it up. Find the edge by just feeling around really. And then line it up and tape it down. All right, take a look at it. Make sure it looks okay. It's not too crazy. Looks good to me. This is how it's gonna look in the end, just like that. There you go. Like I said, I don't know if I did this right, but it's cute, so we're gonna say it's fine. So now let's take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch a little 1/2 inch rectangle over this edge to hold down everything in place. All right, there we go, looking cute. So now I am actually going to add some rivets here because I can and because it'll keep it nice and sturdy. So I've got my rivet press again. I'm going to attach the hole punch die. I can use my leather marking tool here to just find a midpoint on these little stitched rectangles. And then I'll just punch out where that is. So now I'm grabbing the 10mm double cap rivet die, and I've got my 9mm rivets. So I'm just gonna grab a male and a female end, and stick the male end through the strap, and then put the female end on the back. Do this with the other one as well. And you see it adds a nice little decorative element, but also provides a lot of stability to the bag. I'm not just depending on those stitches to hold this handle in place now. All right, there we go. Now you have your handle attached. Isn't that cool? So once you have the handle riveted on, grab the opposite side of your flap, so your lining side of your flap, and lay it right side up. Take your exterior part of your flap and lay it right side down. So right sides together, matching up all the edges, and then clip together, right sides together. Okay, as you can see, I clipped together the sides and the top, but I left the bottom unclipped because we're not going to be sewing there. Now we're going to sew along the sides and the top at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch well at the bottom. If you'd like, you can do a second row of stitching just to really hold it in place. Once you have that sewn in place, go ahead and grab your scissors and just cut down the seam allowance in half so that it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I suggest cutting down these corners a little bit. So kind of cut a diagonal at the corner. It'll just help it from being too bulky when we flip it out. All right, now turn the whole flap right side out through the hole in the bottom. If you need to, you can grab a turning tool. This is my favorite turning tool because it's not too pokey. I don't have to worry about it, ripping the fabric. And then it also has a nice blunt end. So for something like this, I can just use the blunt end to help push out all the little corners. Okay, now we want to flatten out these seams as much as possible so we can top stitch. So I'm just going to roll it with my fingers and see I'm getting it nice and flat so that on the front and the back it looks nice. I don't want to see the lining from the exterior of the bag, so I'll kind of roll it to get it the way I want it. And just push your hand inside to help flatten it out if you need to. All right, once you have it all clipped, make sure it's as flat as you can get it. There we go. So now we're going to top stitch along the clipped edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then we can baste down this bottom edge just to close the hole. Once you have that flap completed, go ahead and set it to the side. So now grab your 2 exterior main panels and we're gonna figure out which one you want to be the exterior of the bag. So you can see in this version, I had this cool panel right here and that's the exterior. The other panel will be seen right here on the inside, but it's gonna have a pocket over it. So decide which panel you wanna use for which. I'm gonna use this big flower right here as the outside of my bag. So I'm going to work on this first. So put the other one to the side. Now this is going to have the fold over flap and the magnet on the top. So if you have a certain placement you want your design to be, think about that now. Think about where the top's going to be. I think this is going to be the top for me. Grab your exterior main panel template, and she also gives you the instructions here if you want to use that, and just mark placement for the female snaps. So just like I did with the male ends, I poked a hole in the pattern piece, and then I just mark in that hole. And I'm once again going to be using my cam snap to press my magnetic snaps in place. First, I'm going to use it to punch out the holes that I just marked. So I'm going to reinstall the top die for my magnetic press. And now I'm going to find the bottom die that has a little nub on it. It kind of looks like the male snap. I'm going to put that in. And then the female snaps look just like this. And then they also have their own caps. So I'm just going to insert the female in through my hole, put the cap on the back of the panel, just like that. Do this for both of them. And once again, I'm going to lay this in the rivet press down so that the cap is up top, snug it in there, and just push it down. Go ahead and do this for both of them. And there we go. Now the female snaps are in place. So fast, so easy. All right, this is your front of your bag. Go ahead and set this to the side. Now grab the other exterior piece, and this is going to be the one that has a nice little pocket on it. So again, figure out placement here. If you'd like, grab one of your clear pockets and just kind of lay it over to see how it's going to look in the end. So I think I want it on the bottom like that. So you're going to need your exterior main panel, one of your clear pockets, one of the taller clear pockets. You should only have 2 tall ones left. You're going to grab one of those. And then also your pocket binding. Now this is going to go wrap around the very top of the pocket. So set the pocket and the exterior to the side. We're just going to work on the binding for a moment. Take your binding and lay it wrong side up, and then just fold it in half, wrong sides together along the long edges, and just press that in place. And you can open it back up. Take those parallel long edges, fold them wrong sides together up to that middle line, and press down. Go ahead and do the same thing with the other edge, pressing it wrong sides together. And then you can fold the whole unit in half so that you have the folded edges on both sides. And then I like to add some clips just to hold it all together. So now take your binding and kind of open it up, grab your clear vinyl, and then just tuck it in and fold over the binding. So it just should be hugging it, and the vinyl should go all the way up to that fold. And then just use some clips to hold it all together. So now let's take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along the bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can definitely top stitch along the top as well, but the bottom edge should be fine. If you're worried about the vinyl sticking to the bed of your sewing machine while you're sewing, just grab your tissue paper, lay it on top, and that's going to help feed this through much easier. Okay, now grab your exterior panel that's going to be used with this pocket panel. Lay your pocket panel right side up on top of it, lining it up with the bottom and the sides. And then we can just clip these together. Now remember, this is your exterior panel that does not have the magnets, so there should be no magnets on this exterior panel here. So now we're going to baste down these sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you haven't had to use anything to help you with the presser foot sticking to the vinyl yet, you might find this is the time you need to do it. So I will show you. I'm going to be putting the tape on the bottom of my presser foot just to help sew this in place. I will tell you, if you're really struggling with this, cover your vinyl with tissue paper. Flip it over, top stitch from the back of your Decoville light. Okay, now let's build these panels. So grab your side accent panels, and you're going to need one of each. Remember, we have 4 total. 2 and 2 are different. We want the long edges to be up against the middle panel. So our little notches are taken out of the side over here. Remember, this is going to be a boxed bag, so these are our little boxed notches over here. So the long edges should be the same length as your exterior panel in the middle. Go ahead and fold these right sides together and clip them along these edges. Do the same for the other side as well. Okay, while we're here, let's go ahead and do this with the exterior panel as well. So this is the other exterior panel with the magnets. Make sure the magnets are on the top. Grab the 2 remaining side panels and lay them again so that the longest edge is up against your exterior panel and your little notches are out towards the outside. Fold them right sides together, lining up that long edge, and clip in place. Do the same on the other side. Now let's take both of these to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along all 4 edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those sewn in place, you can press open the side flaps. If you're using vinyl, just finger press this, you should be fine. So now we're gonna take this back to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch on the vinyl side 1/8 inch away from the seam. You could do a second row of top stitching 1/4 inch away and it would give it a really nice look, but 1 row of top stitching is enough. So there we go. Isn't that adorable? I love this little pocket right here. That's so cute. So you can set this one to the side. This is your front exterior panel of your bag. If you wanted to add a bag tag here, now's a good time to do it. So you can really add this wherever you want, but it's always easiest if you find midpoints on the top and bottom to help you center it. I think I kind of want it on the top of the center of my flower, so I'm going to add it about 3.5 inches down. So I'm going to measure 3.5 inches down from the center, and I'll just use my fabric marker here to mark a spot for that. I then can grab my washer for my bag tag and just center that over my mark. Draw the lines for these slits. Got my seam ripper, and I'm just going to rip right along those vertical marked lines. Pull back the prongs, insert the prongs into those slits from my bag tag. Flip it over, put on the backing. Since I've already got Decoville Light here, I'm okay with, it's beefy enough to hold it in place. I'm gonna grab a little scrap piece of Decoville Light and some beacon glue. Then I'm just going to glue the glue side of my Decoville Light pretty generously. There we go. And then I'm just going to place that over the back of my bag tag. This way the bag tag, if it rubs against the lining, I don't have to worry about it ripping the lining. So once you have your logo or whatever you're going to use as your tag attached, grab your front exterior panel and then grab your bottom panel. And we're just going to take our bottom panel and lay it right side down, lining it up along the bottom edge of our front panel, and it should be exactly the same size. So now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Really, you just want to be right against your Decoville Heavy. You don't want to sew on the Decoville Heavy, just right up against it. Since this is the exterior of the bag and we have a lot of vinyl, I do suggest going over this a second time. Once you have that sewn in place, go ahead and fold this back. And now we're going to top stitch right along this bottom panel. Now here's the thing, you don't have to. I'm going to top stitch on this side, but I'm actually not going to top stitch when we attach the other side, and I'll show you why when we get to that point. And I'll give you tips if you do want to top stitch at that point. But I am going to top stitch right along this edge on the bottom panel at 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, there you go. This is how one panel should look now. Go ahead and set this to the side. Now grab your exterior panel that has that little clear slip pocket, and then grab your completed flap, and you're gonna lay your flap so that the exterior is up. So we have our exterior panel with pocket right side up, and then we have the vinyl exterior side up. And this should just nest in right along this bottom edge. It should be the same length as the little opening right here. So not as long as the whole bottom edge, but just this interior bottom edge where our vinyl is. You should be able to just tuck it in between the side panels just like that. So now you can just baste along this clipped edge right here. Okay, you can put this to the side. Now we're gonna work on the lining. So we're gonna build another clear zipper pocket just like we did on the exterior. So I'm going to take my last clear vinyl pocket and then just fold it short sides together so that I can find the midpoint on the very top edge. You can just mark that with any sort of marker. There we go. And then I'm once again going to find the midpoint on my zipper. Now, you can decide which side you want your zipper to go. If you don't have a preference, then whichever side. But I'm going to have my zipper pull go towards the left. I'm going to take my zipper tape and lay it right side down and match up the midpoint mark on my zipper tape with the midpoint mark on my vinyl. And then I'll just clip my zipper in place along the top edge of my clear vinyl pocket. Once again, I'm going to baste along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So once again, when I was sewing, I put that piece of tissue paper underneath the vinyl so that it didn't stick to my sewing machine. So now we're going to fold the zipper up and the seam down. So the zipper and the seam are going to go down behind the clear pocket. And I fold my pocket so I don't fold it right at the seam. I actually let it go up a little bit further, just a scotch further. If you're using colored vinyl, you're not going to really see the stitches. But even if you are using clear vinyl and you can't seem to just sew right on top of the stitches you just made when you basted this in place, that's okay. You can just remove the basting stitches after you top stitch. So double-sided tape here is also your friend if you want to use that to get this nice and straight. You can see I'm just kind of opening the zipper and then adding my clips to try to straighten it out. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along this folded edge entirely. My goal is to stitch over my basting stitches. If that doesn't happen, that's fine. All right, and just like we did before, I'm going to add some fray check along the bottom edges. Okay, so here's our pocket ready to be placed on the lining. Grab a lining panel and I'm going to go ahead and find the midpoint along the top long edge. So I measured 2 3/4 inch down from this top midpoint mark and I made a dot and then I made a couple of other just like lines to help me measure this up. I'm going to take my clear pocket and I'm going to lay it right side down so my lining is right side up. And the clear pocket part is overextending the top and my midpoint on my zipper tape is going to line up with that midpoint dot that I just made. And then I'm just going to line up my zipper tape with the straight lines that I made using my ruler. So pretty much I'm just trying to get this centered and straight. Once again, I'm going to be using pins here to hold this all together. Okay, so now we can take this to the sewing machine and sew along this edge, this raw edge right here of my zipper tape at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And for the last time, I'm going to be adding my fray check to the raw edges of my zipper tab. Now we're gonna fold this down just like we did before. Try to get it nice and straight. Here we go. Now we're gonna fold down this bottom edge. We're gonna fold the edge back so that we have about a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. And I'm just gonna use some clips to hold that in place. Double-sided tape, again, is highly encouraged here. So now once you have the bottom edge folded under, we're gonna do the same thing on the sides. We're just gonna fold the side edge under. So I'm just gonna bring this raw edge right here all the way up to my zipper tab and just fold that in so that I don't have a raw edge on the sides because these are not gonna be eaten up in a seam allowance, so we wanna just tuck in all of our vinyl raw edges. And then in the bottom corner here, just fold it over. The nice thing about vinyl is that it doesn't fray or anything, so you can really just kind of fold it, and it's not gonna be a problem. So fold in the other side as well, just folding it under, back sides together. I'm just pushing it right up to the edge of my zipper tab. I'm not even measuring. Okay, so now you see the sides and the bottom are all tucked in. It's a nice little pocket. So now what I'm gonna do is just kind of eyeball this, and you can get a ruler out and straighten this out, but I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, get it nice and flat. I'm gonna grab my Scotch tape and I'm just gonna tape it down, just like this. Now Scotch tape really likes sticking to the vinyl. So So you might want to use washi tape here instead because it is very, very sticky on the vinyl. It can be a little difficult to get off. I'm not going to sew over it because it is so sticky. So now I'm going to sew this on anywhere between 1/4 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to go more towards 1/4 of an inch. But what you really want to make sure is you're catching the back edge here. Remember how we folded it all under? You need to catch that seam. So 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to sew around the sides and the bottom. As I come up to my Scotch tape, I'm going to remove this tape before I sew over it. This is a mess to try to get out on vinyl with stitches over it. Don't do it. So washi tape would probably be the best bet here, but if you're using Scotch tape like me, it's great at holding it in place, but remove the tape before you sew over it. We're gonna go around the sides and the bottom. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. There we go. I think you're pretty much done with the clear vinyl now. That was the last of it. Yay! Some of you might have noticed that the tape leaves some of its sticky residue on the clear vinyl. I know. That's why we use washi tape. Don't use the clear tape. But if that happens, this is just a little alcohol prep pad. So it's like a pre-packaged, you know, piece of cloth with alcohol on it. It's like a little piece of felt. If you just rub that over, it'll take off that sticky residue on your vinyl and you should be fine. All right, go ahead and put this to the side for now. So now grab your slip pocket lining pieces. You can see these are a different color lining because I'm gonna show you later. I want you to be able to see something. So on the back of one of your lining pocket panels, you're gonna mark a rectangle that is centered and it is 1 inch down from the top edge, 8 inches long, 1/2 inch high. This is similar to when we do like a recessed zipper pocket. You can add a zipper to this pocket if you'd like. You don't have to. I'm not going to today. Totally your choice. Now grab your remaining lining piece that doesn't have the pocket on it. Let's go ahead and find the midpoint along the top edge of this one. Lay your lining panel right side up. Place your pocket panel 2 inches down from the top of your lining panel and centered. So use your midpoints on both and a ruler to help you with this. I'm going to grab some pins and I'm going to pin inside of this rectangle that I have marked. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch along this 8 inch by 1/2 inch rectangle all the way around. Once you have that stitched in place, you can grab a seam ripper and just rip along the middle of it. So you can see I made a midpoint line and I made some nice little triangles here so that I can go off towards the edge. So once you have that started, you can grab some scissors and I'm just going to cut along this midpoint line till I get to the tip of my little triangle and then go off towards the corners of my rectangle, getting as close as possible to the stitching without actually cutting it. All right, once you have that cut, insert your pocket panel in through the hole. So now your pocket and your lining should be wrong sides together. If you're using waterproof canvas, this is always a little bit tricky. You can use double-sided tape here to help hold this in place if you'd like. If you're using quilt cotton, you can iron this down to get a nice crisp rectangle here. Since I'm not adding a zipper, I can actually use some clips on the inside of this rectangle today to hold this in place. Okay, so get this as flat as possible. I know it's a little messy with the waterproof canvas. I'm just going to kind of hold it in place and manipulate it at the machine. If you're using a zipper here, you're going to attach the zipper from behind, so back here, and tape it in. We've done this a lot in videos. There are multiple videos. I'll have a video posted up here to the top corner showing you how to do it if you're interested in that. But since I'm not adding a zipper, we're just going to top stitch around this rectangle at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Say it with me, friends. Coordinating thread. Thread that is the same color as your fabric. That's okay. This is the lining. It's a little messy. I'm fine with it. It's fine. I'm fine with it. So now let's flip this over. So we're looking at the pocket side. Grab the second lining pocket panel and just lay that right side down against the right side of the pocket panel. It's already attached. And now we can just clip these two pocket panels together. Okay, so I have the sides and the top clipped together. What I'm going to do here on the bottom is I'm gonna fold this bottom edge up, both of the edges, both of the pieces of fabric up a 1/2 inch, and then just clip like this. This is gonna make closing it up later easier. If it's kind of wonky, don't worry about it. Just don't even worry about it. Just fold it up, give yourself about a 1/2 inch here. So now I'm gonna sew around the sides and the top at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't sew the bottom. Make sure you backstitch really well on the beginning and the end, and make sure you have this bottom edge folded over, okay? So it's folded over just like that. Going to stitch all around the sides and the top edge. Alright, there we go. Now we have the pocket sewn in place. Make sure you trim all your threads. You can go ahead and put the lining to the side. Okay, so now we're going to attach this top zipper. Now, I'm using zipper tape, and I cut this down to 14.5 inches long. I'm going to show you. On this first bag I made, I added zipper tabs to both ends of my zipper tape, which I really like. It looks great. It has a nice finish. However, that meant I couldn't top stitch on both sides of my exterior bottom. So you can see down here, I top stitched on one side, but I wasn't able to top stitch on the other side. Now, I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I don't even think it's noticeable. So for today, I'm going to again attach zipper tabs to both ends. However, if you want to be able to top stitch on the bottom and you want to use my method here, add a zipper tab to the closed side. So you see when I move my zipper like this side here closes. When I open it, this side here opens. So you're going to leave the open side alone, but just add a zipper tab to the closed side. And then on the open side, you can fold it down and stitch down like that. I'll have a link to a video to show you how to do that. You know what? I'll just show you. I'll just show you how to do it. I'll just show you. Pulled my leg, all right? You pulled my leg. I heard you. I heard those of you who are like, but I want to see. Okay. So first things first, the zipper tab needs to go on the edge of the zipper that is going to be closed pretty much all the time. So when I open it, this is my open edge here. See? Hello, I'm open. And this is my closed edge. So we're going to attach the zipper tab to the closed edge. Go ahead and clip it on, and we're going to top stitch along this interior edge at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, zipper tab is attached. Go ahead and trim it down so it's the same width as your zipper tape. For this open edge here, measure down anywhere between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch. 1/2 inch is ideal, but it's a little tricky, so I'm going to measure down 3/4 inch from this top open edge and mark in the seam allowance just on the edge of the zipper tape. Do this on both sides of your zipper tape. Now, pinch your zipper tape wrong sides together right at that mark, and you'll notice the teeth go up and over to the side behind your pinch. That's what we want. We want this to go at a 90-degree angle behind the pinch, just like that, and then add a clip to hold it in place. So you see that? You see how it just goes up and over and it folds behind the zipper tape? Go ahead and do this on the other side as well. All right, now let's go baste these in place. So right at about 1/8 inch seam allowance, we're just going to sew along the zipper tape edge over the teeth just to hold this in place. I always start sewing from the middle of the zipper tape down towards the edge where my teeth are. So once you have those stitched down, you see now when you close your zipper, it just stops like that. It doesn't go off the edge. This is a really nice finish. It's a really nice finish. So there we go. So now grab your front exterior panel. You should already have the midpoint marked on the top edge. If you don't, make sure you mark that midpoint now. Grab your zipper that we just made and mark the midpoints on both sides of your zipper tape. Take your zipper, and when the zipper is closed, the zipper pull should be on the left, and lay it right side down with the exterior right side up, and match up those midpoint marks, and then clip along the entire edge. The zipper should not be as long as the top of your exterior panel. It should be shorter. Okay, now let's take this to the sewing machine and just baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have this basted on, grab your lining panel that has that slip pocket, and we're gonna lay that right side down, the exterior is right side up, and just line up these top straight edges together and clip together. Okay, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this top clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you have any of your zipper tape overhanging, go ahead and trim that down. So now take your lining and exterior and push them wrong sides together. So we're just pulling this zipper out up top over here. If you're using quilt cotton, you can just press this with an iron. But if you're using vinyl like we are, you're going to need to finger press this. You can unzip the zipper to help you get this nice and straight. So I'm finger pressing. I can also add some clips here around the zipper tape. We just really want this top edge here to be as straight as possible. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Only top stitch where there's zipper. So about 3/4 of an inch from each edge, you should have no stitching whatsoever. Don't start on the edges over here. We're going to start where the zipper tape is, back stitch, go across, end where the zipper tape ends, and back stitch. There we go. We have one side attached. Now we can just attach the other side. So grab your other exterior panel. This is the one with the flap. If you haven't marked the midpoint line on this exterior panel, go ahead and do that. All right, now move the flap out of the way. The flap is not invited to this. So we want the exterior panel with the little slip pocket right side up, midpoint up top. Grab your other exterior panel with the zipper and lay it right side down. Match up the midpoint mark of your zipper with the midpoint mark of that exterior panel and clip together. And then just clip along this entire edge. Now let's baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that basted in place, grab your remaining lining panel and lay that right side down and just line it up along this top edge that you just sewed on. So again, I like to do the corners first and then the middle. And then I'll just clip the rest of it together. Now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, if you have zipper tape hanging off the edge, go clip that down. If you use zipper tabs on both sides, you shouldn't have this at all. Okay, now pull the lining panel back. This bag is kind of big here. So that it's wrong sides together with the exterior, just like this. So I might have to kind of manipulate it all around. Okay, so now just like we did before, we want to get this seam by the zipper as straight as possible. You can iron this if you'd like to get it nice and straight, at least where you have the quilt cotton. Okay, so now I'm going to top stitch along this pinned edge at a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. But again, I'm only top stitching where my zipper tape is, not all the way on the edges. So I'm going to start by my zipper tape over here, back stitch when I start, go all the way down, and then back stitch at the end. But I'm not going off the side. I'm stopping when I get to the end of my zipper tape. All right, here we go. This is getting pretty big. I know it can be kind of a wrestling match at your sewing machine, but it's looking good. Okay, so now let's separate the exterior and the lining. If you use clips, go ahead and remove those now. Now, what we want to do is we want to get this bottom panel to line up with this bottom edge of the other exterior. So you see the bottom panel is already stitched onto one exterior. Now we're going to stitch it onto the other exterior, and just like before, it should line up perfectly between these notched edges. So just line it up and clip it in place. This seam does get pretty bulky. Just be aware, it's getting pretty thick down here, especially if you're using vinyl. So now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Just like before, we're mostly paying attention to getting right next to that Decoville heavy, but not sewing on top of it. Okay, so just like I did on the other side, I went over this twice. This is very bulky. You don't want these seams splitting or the thread ripping or the thread being like really noticeable, so I went over it twice. Now, this is the first time I'm doing this, so let's figure this out. So we're gonna unzip the main zipper, which is this one right here all the way. And the goal is here to top stitch this bottom panel. Really? Okay. Okay, this is going to be a little tricky, but that's okay. So, you don't need to do this. Let me just, you don't need to top stitch this. So, if this is too much and you're happy with how it looks because when I'm looking at this, it looks fine to me. See, I'm fine with one end being top stitched and the other end not being top stitched. However, I want to show you how to do it in case you want to. So, this is going to require some wrestling at the sewing machine, but you want to keep your flap out of the way and move your zipper out of the way as well. And what we're going to do, can't really see because it's so dark, but we're going to top stitch. We move the seam naturally wants to do this, but the seam is behind the bottom panel, and we're going to top stitch over this bottom panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, catching that seam underneath it. Good luck. All right, there we go, we did it. It can be done. If you want to add purse feet, this is your last chance to do it. So, you know, it'd be cute with some purse feet, but we're not going to. I'm not going to. Okay, now let's finish up this bag. So let's put our lining panels right sides together and our exterior panels right sides together just like this. We're going to pull it out just like that. So let's deal with the sides first. I'm going to pinch the seams so that they go towards the exterior, just like that. And then I'm going to line up the bottom corners, and then I'm just going to clip along the exteriors, right sides together, just along the side right here. I'm going to do the same thing on the lining side. Okay, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew the exterior sides at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. The seam right here between the lining and the exterior at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. And then the lining side I'm going to sew at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So if I start on the lining side, I'm going to start at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, go down as I get to this middle right here, do a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, and then continue on. Make sure you're back stitching really well at the beginning and the end. Pay attention if you're using zipper tabs or if just the end of your zipper. You don't want to sew over your zipper or your zipper tabs. You want to get really close to it. So if you want to use a zipper foot here, that's great because that way you can get really close to the edge of these zippers without actually touching them. Just make sure you're not sewing over them. I do suggest, at least on the exterior, you go over the stitching a second time so that your stitches won't be seen when you turn the whole bag right side out. After we have that sewn, I'm going to just trim down the seam allowance just so that it's about 1/4 of an inch. So now we're going to work on boxing these corners of the exterior only. So just tug on this. It should all just kind of line up really nicely. So my seams from my bottom are going to go in towards each other, and then the whole thing should just lay really nice and flat. I found this to be one of the easiest box corners to do. Everything just goes in the direction it's supposed to. See what I mean? Just like that. So do this on the other side as well. Just let those bottom seams go in towards the bottom. Now let's sew along these two clipped edges at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. I do suggest going over it twice. Okay, once you have those sewn, you can trim down the seam allowance so it's about 1/4 of an inch. Just don't want it too bulky. So now we're just going to flip the whole bag out through the bottom of our lining. So now what we're going to do, this was a new to me way of closing up the lining. So with your slip pocket, remember the bottom of your slip pocket is open. Reach your hand in through the slip pocket and pull the lining out through that slip pocket. So you see I'm tugging my lining through the slip pocket. And this is why I made the slip pocket a different color so that you could see the difference between the slip pocket and the lining. So I'm just pulling the lining out. Here we go. So the lining is pulled out through the slip pocket. And when you do that, the lining should be right sides together, wrong sides out. So first things first, let's sew along the bottom straight edge. So I'm just going to tug on my lining and clip it together, right sides together, along that bottom edge. And now let's take this to the sewing machine, and I'm gonna sew along this edge at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you kind of have like a lot of mush right here, you can clip down the sides as well to get this nice and flat so you don't have to worry about accidentally sewing over other parts of the lining. There we go. So now I'm going to trim along that seam just so it's not super bulky, cutting it down to about a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. There we go. And now we're just going to box the corners. So just like we did before, you're just going to tug along the sides. And just, I'm going to have these seams from the side and the bottom go in opposite directions. There we go. This is a little tricky to get flat at the machine because it is all, you know, crumpled up together. So pull along these sides as best you can to get it really flat down further here. And then use some clips further down the side to help hold it in place. But also just remember, this is the lining. If it's not perfect, it's fine. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along these 2 boxed corners at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now I'm just gonna trim down that seam allowance a little bit. And now take that lining and push it back through the hole in your pocket. There we go. And now you can take the whole lining and push it down into the bag. If you have any zipper tabs on the top, make sure you reach in and just kind of poke them out. It's always easiest to poke it out from just the inside of the bag rather than between the lining and the exterior. Just poke them out like that. All right, there we go. All we have to do now is close up this hole in our pocket. So pull the pocket straight up. So now all you have to do is fold this down. I'm going to fold it down about 1/2 of an inch. You can kind of pull on it and it should all just fold down on its own for the most part. There we go. So fold it down. Both raw edges in towards the center of the pocket and clip together. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, it's the inside of a pocket. Nobody is going to look at that. All right, now I'm just gonna top stitch along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, push the pocket in, and we're done. All right, are you guys ready to see the finished bag? It's so cute. I love this. I love that we did like a darker vinyl on this. It's much more moody. I feel like this is like an artist's canvas, right? Or not a canvas, like an artist toolkit. So this would be great for any of the artists in your life. You could fill this up with some art supplies for them. You could put some paintbrushes, some markers, some pads of paper inside. I feel like there's a lot you could do with this. If you modify this and make it a crossbody or use it for something that I haven't mentioned, let me know. I really want to see the different versions of this because this is so cool. I know some of you guys have looked at bags like this before and you've even suggested making them into lunch bags. So if you use some insulated batting on this part right here, you could definitely do that. You could put your lunch inside. You could put your utensils. If you have chopsticks, you can use chopsticks. All kinds of fun stuff. I just love this type of pattern. There's so many things you can do with it. And it's honestly just really fun and really unique. This is a great bag for teenagers, for kids, for anybody who's creative in your life. It's something that they probably haven't seen before and it's extremely unique. So I'm really excited to share this tutorial with you guys today. I hope you love making the bomb.com bag as much as I do. Thank you so much to Lauren, as always, for allowing me to film tutorials using her patterns. I absolutely love Lauren's patterns. You've heard me go on and on and on about how much I love watching Lauren's YouTube videos. I love watching her tutorials. She is the ultimate bag professional. One day I hope to be able to make a bag that is as stunning as the ones she makes. They're out of this world. They're out of this world. So if you're not already subscribed to Lauren's YouTube channel, please make sure you go subscribe to it. I'll have a link for it down in the description of this video. You will learn so much from her videos. I promise you, I have learned so many tips and tricks from her videos. You will love her videos if you're not already watching. If you are already subscribed to Lauren's channel, you know what I'm talking about. So thanks so much for sewing with me today. I hope you had as much fun as I did. I cannot wait to see your version of the bomb.com bag. I hope you love saying bomb.com beauty bag as much as I do. I hope you have a fantastic day. Have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.